Cruising can be an incredible experience for you and your family. So many places to see: Alaska, Caribbean destinations, and so much more. And today I'm going over the 9 lessons that I've learned when it comes to cruising all around, whether it be Caribbean, Alaska, and other destinations. I love cruising, love it so much, and I've got to tell you, there are a lot of things about it that I feel like they're doing right that other places can either learn from or maybe change to be more like cruising. But one of the things I like so much is just being able to sit back, relax, and enjoy without having to plan every single detail of your vacation. Now, when it comes to these tips, some of these things you do have to plan in advance, but it's nothing like what you'd have to do if you're going to Walt Disney World, just as an example, just because, Genie Plus and the reservation system and all this, that can be really frustrating. This is what has really pushed a lot of people towards cruising, and I definitely see that as well. So let's go over the first one. Number 1 on my list, lessons learned: get a passport. Now, this seems like a basic one, and we're going to talk about the basic part, yes, but the passport piece is important because it's going to save you a lot of frustration for getting back to the port. Let me explain. When I was on a Royal Caribbean cruise, that's the one example I'm thinking of, but I think Celebrity had the same thing happen. When I was on a Royal Caribbean cruise, I saw a lot of guests getting off the ship. Of course, last day of the cruise, we all had fun. And as you're stepping off, everyone kind of goes into the central, return to the port authority folks. And there are 2 lines that form, especially for this Royal Caribbean cruise, and Celebrity had it too. You either had the passport line or you had the driver's license and birth certificate line. Now, if you had your driver's license and birth certificate, they were saying about 25 or 30-minute wait. The reason was they have to check every single person. For the passport, now I'm not sure if that's true or not, but I did see a long line. For the passport, it was so much faster. You were just going up to this screen. It would scan your face. Not sure how big of a fan I am of that, by the way. It's kind of like weird, like Face ID, but like with Port Authority, it was very weird. But they scan your face with this camera system, and then it turns green. You walk through, and you're back. That is how fast it was. It was incredibly quick, and we didn't speak to anyone. But on a different cruise that I went on, same situation. This was the Celebrity versus Royal. I went through, had the green light turn on, and then I was pulled aside by one of the Port Authority folks to check my bags. He was just checking for random things, or I guess it was probably drugs or something like that. Went through the scanner, double-checked, everything was fine, and I kept on my way. I think even though I was pulled aside one time just to ensure everything was okay, and it still was so much faster with the passport than it was with the birth certificate and photo ID. Now, the basic things that we've talked about before, the birth certificate and photo ID are also going to make it really difficult if the cruise has to, for whatever reason, it doesn't happen that frequently, but from time to time, if it has to stop, let's pretend in a port of call, and they can't make it back because there's a problem with the ship, and they have to fly you home. Now, more often than not, it's going to be fine to have your birth certificate and photo ID for the cruises that allow it, but it's going to make things a whole lot easier if you have your passport with you. So it's one of the things that I highly recommend. I actually went with my mom not too long ago. We went on a cruise, and she didn't have her passport then. We had a photo ID, and we had to wait in that line instead of going with the passport. So highly recommend putting the investment in, getting that passport. You don't have to renew it that frequently. It lasts for a long time, and it is definitely worth it. Second lesson learned on my list: get those dining preferences early. Now, what do I mean by this one? It means if you want early dining, I'm thinking of a Disney cruise for a moment, you've got to get it as soon as you can. Now, early dining and late dining is for most cruises. Some cruises actually have anytime dining or my time dining, which I did on Celebrity. That's fun too. It really is. Usually isn't too long of a wait. We'll get back to that. But when it comes to those preferences in advance, if you don't get early dining, the chance that you'll get it once it's sold out are pretty low, just because a lot of people love earlier dining. Maybe it's like 5:15, 5:45, whatever it is. You'll find it really difficult to get from the wait list into, actual that dining time. There was one occasion where I was on the wait list for earlier dining on the Disney Cruise Line, and I did get it before I stepped on board, which was really nice. But there was another occasion which I asked for early dining, it was on the wait list, and it didn't happen. Too many people were on board, and sometimes that does happen. So getting that preference earlier is going to save you a lot of headache when you're on board and everybody wants to eat earlier, and you got to go and find other ways to eat earlier because everybody's hungry and wants to eat before 8:15 p.m., especially on the Disney Cruise Line. Now, if you are left with any time or my time dining, Celebrity Cruise Line I'm thinking of for a moment, you are usually in pretty good shape, simply because the longest I waited when I used my time dining was just about 20 minutes. We didn't wait more than that, just because, usually they can clear out the tables pretty quickly. Thinking of the Celebrity Beyond, which I was on recently, the Celebrity Beyond has 4 different main dining rooms, and you can go for any of them that you want. You just get one of those kind of the buzzers that tell you when your table is ready, and you can get all 4 if you really want to. You can go to every restaurant and say, can I get a spot for this many people? And they'll give you a buzzer and they'll say approximately how long it's going to be. Then you can just wait to see which one is going to buzz first. Now, one tip about this, if you do use that buzzer to wait for the different restaurants, you are going to have to keep track of which one is which, because they all look the exact same. So if you're going to Tuscany, you're going to need to know the difference between that one and the other ones. Otherwise, you're going to bring back the buzzer and they're going to be like, oh, no, your table's not ready yet. And you have to figure out which buzzer that restaurant is for. It's a little fun fact there. Now, the 20-30 minutes that I waited for anytime dining is not always the case. That should be noted. It's simply because that ship that I was on was not as crowded as other ships that I've been on. Now, when you think about the kind of research and homework you have to do when it comes to a Walt Disney World vacation, that's a whole different mountain to climb. But when it comes to cruising, one of the things that I really recommend researching in advance are the excursions. And this is lesson learned number 3, excursions for the cruise, with and without the ship. Now, I've been on several excursions at this point. Got to tell you, I love them, whether it be jumping off waterfalls, the Damajagua Waterfall Adventure, or hiking around San Juan. There's a lot of cool things to see out there, especially in the Caribbean, where I really love to cruise. Usually my go-to spot when it comes to cruising is just super convenient to get to. But when it comes to these excursions, you want to look up what is available with the ship and not with the ship, right? So there are some zip lining adventures that I was looking at. I think this was in Tortola. And when I was looking at it through the ship, it was basically double the cost through the ship that it would be just through the port. Now, if you're saying to yourself, okay, Michael, I'm not sure if I want to do it just like through a third party. I want to make sure the cruise ship knows where I am. Totally understand that. And for me personally, I liked doing it through the cruise ship at first, just for that peace of mind, just to think to myself, okay, if anything happens, cruise ship has got me. They know what to do. They'll fly me where I have to go. It'll be no problem. And for your first few cruises, it's not a bad idea. It gives you that peace of mind. Everything's all set up for you. You don't have to go out and find that third party vendor, and you're set. But the more experienced you get with cruising, the more you'll very likely want to go and try these third party experiences. Many of them are actually right by the port or provide some kind of transportation to and from the experience. That's not always the case, by the way. There are some that require taxis to get to and from, of course. I'm not saying that all of them are going to be right by the port. It's not how it works. But just to give you an example, you can kind of work your way in to get into these third-party adventures that are not through the ship. Many of these people can be found, of course, online on the internet. You just look best things to do when you're on a cruise from Tortola or St. Thomas or wherever it is, and you'll find a lot of different companies who are available. I've actually used, you can use Google. The Yelp's got some reviews on some of the things, so you can go back and just double check how that third-party vendor, was when you went and experienced that for maybe half the cost where the cruise ship would charge you. So it's just something to think about when you're considering these excursions. And there's no one right way to cruise, right? You don't have to go on all these excursions right away. You can, do them another day. You can just do the cruising exactly how you want to do it. But if you're thinking about excursions, continue to research these things and figure out what's best for you and whether or not you want to do it through the cruise or as a third party. For me personally, I like doing it through the cruise. It's convenient, but I have done the third party option as well. I feel like kind of a mix is good. Things that I feel more confident in, I'll go for and try that third party directly. Things that I'm like, okay, I'm not sure what this is going to be about. I'll let the ship do the coordinating for me. Number 4, and I learned this one, I think it was at St. Martin. It was a recent cruise that I went on. You want to make sure you bring some cash, and that's really important, especially at some of these places where you really want to shop. And my personal favorite place to shop in the Caribbean is St. Martin. I love shopping there. The biggest reason is they think the taxes are different. They can charge like a lot less because it's not like U.S. taxes. There's some tax thing that I have no idea how it works. I just know it's less expensive to buy some of your favorite things in St. Martin. Sunglasses, purses, you name it. There's a lot of cool stuff available there. Now, this kind of brings us back to lesson learned number 3 a little bit. There's a water taxi, right? So right by the port, there's a shopping area in St. Martin. Really nice, but not that big. If you buy the water taxi ticket, you can buy it through the ship, I'm sure, but you can also get it third party, and I highly recommend getting it third party. Just go up to the kiosk, get your ticket, and get that water taxi. It was so convenient, and the water taxi will bring you to a different part of St. Martin, which has these like streets lined with different shopping areas. The beaches are there. It is so nice to be able to experience St. Martin that way. There's actually it's like a party vibe on that water taxi, by the way. That's so much fun. But you're going to want cash both to tip people, right, who are helping you, whether it be a third-party taxi driver or someone you want to shop from who's kind of like on the street corner. There's a lot of ways that you're going to want to be using cash, and some will accept card, yes, but some won't. So it's just something to think about. Definitely bring cash. that you will want to shop with when you're out and about. Lesson number 5. This is for me too. I make this mistake a lot. Research that ship. I like being surprised, so this is kind of my own thing a little bit. I like being surprised on a lot of these cruise ships, but I also want to know a little bit of what I'm getting into. So this is kind of a double-edged sword. I will research the ship a little bit. I'll find out when it was built, some of the cool amenities on board, but I won't overdo it. And that's me, because I do like a genuine surprise when I walk on board a ship for the first time, especially if it's a line that I haven't been to in a long time or never been to before. When I went on Celebrity, I found out just how grand it was. I had some pictures in my mind, but I didn't do too much research because I didn't want to spoil it for myself. I wanted to have that oh my gosh moment instead of saying to myself as I step on board, like, oh yeah, that's what I learned about this. You know what I mean? So it's two sides of it. Some people want to know everything. Some people want to know exactly what every part of the ship is going to look like. Some people want to be surprised. It's something to think about. You want to research it a little bit at least, but save some, in my opinion, as a surprise when you step on board. It just makes the thing fun. The next one I learned recently, I went to a specialty dining experience on board the Celebrity Beyond. It was the Fine Cut Steakhouse, one of the best dining experiences that I have had on board a cruise ship. And I've got to tell you, I booked it in advance of the cruise, and once I went on it on board, I felt to myself, you know what? This is so good. This food is so amazing. I want to go to La Voyage. I want to go to Raw on 5. And when I went, and these are the different restaurants, by the way, when I went onto the website, or the app, on the app on board to try and book these restaurants, I realized that the price of the restaurant had gone up tremendously. The reason for this is because when I got the Fine Cut Steakhouse reservation, I made the reservation in advance of the cruise. That's lesson learned number 6. You want to make sure that you get these specialty dining reservations or drink packages in advance of the cruise. Now, drink packages is a little bit of a change to that. First day of the cruise, sometimes they offer something special as well, so that's something to research or look into. But more often than not, in advance of the cruise, you're going to find the best deals for whether it be the drink packages or photo packages, whatever it is, you're going to want to book them in advance. One of the hard parts about this, by the way, is the fact that you have to kind of coordinate it around your schedule. So for me, for example, I really wanted to go to Lobster Night on board the Celebrity Beyond, but I knew I also wanted to try the Fine Cut Steakhouse. So I had to try and figure out, because they don't tell you in advance. Celebrity does not tell you. No cruise ship really tells you every day of the itinerary in advance. You want to try and figure out what your itinerary might look like from past itineraries that you've seen online or whatever it is, to try and figure out when, for me, for example, Lobster Night is, so that you can book Fine Cut Steakhouse on a different day. So that's just something to consider. One of those other pieces of the puzzle I wanted to throw in there. Something that I learned. I want to make sure that you figure that out for yourself as well. Number 7 on our lessons learned list. Say that 3 times fast. Lessons learned list. Lessons learned. It's not very fast. Number 7 is to make sure you check your statement on board during the sailing and not just on the last day. This actually happened to me on MSC. It was an MSC sailing, I think it was. And I was on board and I realized that I was being charged for things that I did not purchase, right? So I think there was a drink on one of the bars that was just kind of put into my statement, right? And I can check the statement. I think it was both in the app and on the TV monitor in my room. So you can check it in several different ways depending on the cruise line that you're on. But you want to make sure that you check it to ensure that nothing's being charged, incorrectly to your account. I went to guest services. This was, I think, the second to last day, so we still had time. And I told them what had happened, and they said, "Oh, okay, we'll fix that." And they checked the cameras to make sure that you're not just, fibbing and saying, "Oh no, you definitely did do that." But they fixed it, no problem. They realized it wasn't me who charged it, and that was that, right? So it's easy. If I hadn't been paying attention to that statement, I would have had to stand in a super long line at the end of the cruise to go to guest services and fix this charge. Because I realized it earlier, I went right to guest services, didn't wait more than 5 minutes, and I was there. So there's something to be said for checking this just as you go once or twice before the last night of the cruise, because everybody knows that last night of the cruise is super packed. That's kind of a bonus lesson learned for me. Do not wait to go to guest services for the last night of the cruise. You're going to want to get to guest services, fix any issues with the statement or anything else in advance of the last night. Thinking about the cruise ships that we've been on, some of the incredible experiences out there, it's really important as you're thinking about the cruise, and this is number 8 for me, I'm thinking about lessons learned, to make sure that you pick the ship that makes sense for you. Let me explain. For me, I love like the newer amenities and some of those special dining experiences. And with that, I choose ships. Line is almost irrelevant. I choose the ship that best meets that, right? So if you're on Disney Cruise Line is kind of an exception to this rule because Disney Cruise Line's kind of, everything's very similar on a lot of their ships. But for example, Celebrity, right? You go on the older Celebrity cruise ships, it's going to have a slightly different feel than if you go on the newer one. Let me give you another example. Royal Caribbean's Independence of the Seas, very frequently out of Port Canaveral. I had an idea of what the ship was all about, but I'm looking forward to maybe a symphony class, right? Where it's a much bigger, newer ship with different amenities, different restaurants. These kind of things, researching in advance, are going to help you a lot. So being able to pick the ship, not just the line. Some people have their favorite line, Disney or Celebrity or Royal, and they say, okay, that's the one I'm sticking with. I love this line. I just want to keep going with them. That's great. No problem there. But you want to make sure that when you're thinking about your next cruise, you pick the specific ship that has the things that you want to experience. If you continue to go on the same class of ship again and again and again, there's no problem with it. Just know that it's going to be the exact same, right? So the Edge, the Apex, or the Disney Dream and Fantasy, they're very similar, right? They're going to have very similar things on board. So just something to consider as you're thinking about these other cruises that you want to go on. Actually, speaking of Disney, you want to make sure Disney's got different dining. So if you go on the Dream and Fantasy, it's going to be more of a difference than if you went on the Edge or the Apex, right? The Edge and the Apex are two Celebrity cruise ships in the same family. They are going to be very similar. Dream and the Fantasy are going to be similar too, but the restaurants are slightly different. So it's just something to think about when you're thinking about cruising. Number 9, and one of the tips that I really, really value is paying those tips in advance. This is one of those things that when you come off of a cruise and you just had a fantastic time, you spent some money, you went shopping, you went specialty dining, and at the end of the cruise, you come away with a $300, $400, $500 bill, maybe even more, that just automatically gets charged to your account. It's not a fun feeling, right? You're like, okay, I wish this was not happening right now, and instead, kind of was I took care of that in advance, less to worry about. I come back and there's no surprise charges. Now these quote unquote surprise charges are the tips, right? For on board, take care of the people who are taking care of you, the stewards and all that. It's nice to be able to thank them with tips and all this, but being able to do that in advance just takes that extra burden off of your mind when you're thinking about the very last day of the cruise where it's like, oh, that's right, they're going to charge my account this amount of money as I step off of the ship. Just one of those things that I personally, if I have the option to pay in advance, I'm going to do that. It makes everything simpler. Those are my 9 lessons learned from cruising in the past. There are so many amazing experiences out there. I'm looking forward to sharing more with you as we journey together into the future. Thanks everybody for being a part of it with me. Until next time, have a magical day.